Hey guys, it's Nicole. I'm back with another video. And today's video is going to be about a book I actually read when I think I was in the 8th grade. So I have had to take a slight reading slowdown. I'm still reading some books, and there's one that I can't wait to talk about, but I'm not done with them yet. And I have just had so much going on that my extra time has kind of left the building for the moment. It is being used for other things. I mentioned in my previous video that I'm moving, and that is one part of it. Yes, 100% that is absolutely one part of it, one reason why I have had so little time these days. There is something else that is exciting. I'm going on vacation very, very soon. I'm not going to say when, but I'm going to Paris, France. I am very, very excited. It's another solo trip that I'm taking. My last one was last year in 2025, actually in February, and now this one is 2026, also in February. That's a coincidence. That was not on purpose. It was just there's a special event that I'm going to specifically that I'm kind of making a vacation out of that was just in February. I just couldn't help it. But basically, it's also something that's taking up a lot of my time because it's international travel. So packing and doing all that stuff and preparing for that, especially because of things I have to prepare for before I go, has also been taking up my time. So there's a lot going on in my life right now. So I haven't had a lot of time to read. So this book is going to be one of the books I read such a long time ago because it's a really good one, and I'd love to give my thoughts on it. Before we get into that, I wanted to say if you have subscribed to my channel at any point in the history of my channel, thank you so, so, so much. All of you always do mean so much to me, and I'll keep saying it because it is true, and I want you guys to know it. If you haven't subscribed, just go ahead and click the subscribe button. It takes less than a second. It's totally free. You'll get notified when I upload new videos, and it's a good thing to get notified because you never know when my schedule is going to change. Sometimes I get to upload videos like a day or two before or after, whenever, even though Tuesdays and Fridays is my typical schedule. Things have been a little chaotic and changing, and just for a little bit. So if you subscribe, you'll get notified whenever that changes. If you end up enjoying this video, please like, comment, and share. I always want to hear your thoughts. I always, always, always want to hear from you guys. So please comment below respectfully. If you're not being respectful in the comments, I will remove those comments. So let's be respectful. And please share this video. I always, always, always ask you guys to do that. It would be such a favor to me to share this video because that's how people find out about my channel. So please share. So now that we got that out of the way, getting into the book we're talking about today. I read this book literally as part of the curriculum when I was in 8th grade, and my best memory from reading this book, not just because it's a good book, was we read it in my 8th grade class in my reading and literature class, and it was such a big hit with my class because we read it out loud. We spent a couple of weeks, it's a short book. We spent a couple of weeks where we read it out loud. So each student would get assigned okay, you're going to read this section, you're going to read this section, and blah, 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 blah. And so we read it out loud together. And every single person in the class, and this was 8th grade, mind you, so middle school, that age, kids don't usually care about anything. And the fact that all of us loved and got so into this book just stuck with me my whole life. Everyone just got so into it. We were like, well, what happens now? We want to keep going. Wait, we want to know more. And I remember that so vividly. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this book, but also just give my thoughts on it a little bit. So the book that we're going to be talking about today is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. Of course, this is, I guess you could call it an American classic. I think most people read this at some point in their school years in the US, I think. And I read it in 8th grade. It really is such a good book. Honestly, it is. You know, a lot of the books that they end up having students read for curriculum, a lot of the time we forget most of those books, right? Honestly, I don't think I could name all of the books I read in school. I can name some of them. this is definitely one of them. I think I can remember the ones I read in high school, honestly, more because it was slightly more recent. But this was such a good choice to have students read, because especially at the age we read it, because we were 8th grade, around the ages of 14 to 15, possibly even 13. And the main character is kind of around that age, honestly. Is like 14 years old. And so it's relatable at that time. It's more comprehensible for kids of that age to read a main character that is their own age and cares about the things that they care about. So I think that this was such a good choice for curriculum to read when I was in school. I don't know if kids still read it these days. I actually don't know when this book came out. I never looked at that before. Let's see what it says. First copyright was 1967. Wow, that's a lot older than I thought it would be. Wow. And then it has like copyright renewed 1995. That's wild. I was gonna guess 70s or 80s, but 60s is not what I was gonna guess. Before I get into any more of my thoughts, any more specifics anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and read the back. It's really short. At the top of the back up here, it says a heroic story of friendship and belonging, which I think is a great tagline to describe the book. So the blurb says, Ponyboy can count on his brothers and on his friends, but not on much else besides trouble with the Socs, a vicious gang of rich kids whose idea of a good time is beating up greasers like Ponyboy. At least he knows what to expect, until the night someone takes things too far. There is a review quote directly underneath that, which I will read because it's really short. It says, this remarkable novel gives a moving, credible view of the outsiders from the inside. We meet powerful characters in a book with a powerful message. And that is a quote from the Horn book. So that is a great description. The quote describes the book very well, but the blurb is kind of perfect, honestly. Our main character, his name is Ponyboy. He lives with his two older brothers, I should say. His oldest brother, Derry, I know it makes it sound like Milk Dairy, is not, it's Darry, is their legal guardian, basically. Him and his other older brother. So there's Derry, Ponyboy, and then in the middle is Soda Pop. I love that they have those names. It feels very real for kids that are basically raising themselves and identify their family as more of other kids, boys their own age. Ponyboy lives with his two older brothers, and his oldest brother is his legal guardian. I don't remember what happened to their parents. I think they passed. Not naturally, I think. I'm not sure. I can't remember specifically. But they are, I don't even want to say they're like part of a gang, because their friends, the other greasers, it's so hard to call them a gang because really they're just a group of kids that are kind of on the outside that stick up for each other and take care of each other when they live in a neighborhood that is so violent, and especially one that is so targeted by the Socs. The Socs you could call a gang because they are a group of rich kids that get together to beat up and hurt the quote-unquote greasers. So them you could call a gang. The greasers, not so much. They're more so a family than anything else, or a friend group. But I'd call them more of a family than a friend group. A dysfunctional one, but still a family. And I just remember, and I think the reason why it really hit home so hard, especially in 8th grade, is like the tagline says, friendship and belonging, because this is a fictional, more dramatized example of belonging somewhere. And I think when we're all teenagers, we're constantly looking and searching for where we belong, right? I feel like I spent my entire teenage years just constantly trying on personalities, which I think is what every teenager does, to figure out where I belonged. Who am I? Who are my people? Where do I belong? What do I want? And that is really the overall theme of this book. And that's why I think it was so perfect to have 8th graders read this, to have 14 to 15, possibly 13-year-olds read this. That is the perfect age to have kids read a story about a group of friends, because that's really what they are, a family, that go through some really horrible things because they live in a very violent neighborhood. They're not well off. They are in poverty. It is true, all of them. Even though they don't all live together, the group of friends, they all live in poverty. And it's dangerous. It's very violent. And the way that they stick together and protect each other and themselves and do good things it's a very touching story, and it really hits home for kids of that age, because Ponyboy is that age. And I think those are my really big thoughts on this book, of how important it was for me to read a book at this age. You know, I read it so long ago at this point, I can't remember every single detail, but I have seen the movie more recently. I actually watched the movie for the first time right after I read this book, because our teacher actually showed it to us, which was genius, because we were so into it. Normally kids, when you put on movies in classrooms, they're just like, I don't care, they check out, they take a nap, like, to do whatever. All of us were like, Ponyboy, no, or Johnny, no, and it was the best, like, biggest group of camaraderie, and just all of us just in the moment and loving the story so much. And that has stuck with me my whole life. I was in 8th grade at that point. That was a long time ago, and that has stuck with me since then. And I just hope that even if this is not part of curriculums anymore in public schools, because I have no idea, that at least there's some book similar enough to have students read. You know, I feel like we're going through a really tough crisis right now with teenagers and their identities, because we're in a new era where teenagers are growing up so much more on social media than they used to. Even when I was in school, social media was so different. You know, I didn't get Facebook, because Facebook was the big thing when I was first introduced to social media, until I was 13, 14-ish. And, you know, really what social media was back then was just a way for kids to use the internet to talk to each other outside of school. It's really what it was, you know. I had a cell phone at that time because I would be home alone a lot, and so my parents were like, we're going to give you a cell phone because we need to know that you have access to call us all the time. But most kids did not have cell phones at that time, at least not all of my friends did. And so social media was really just a way for kids to talk to each other outside of school, and it kind of stayed that way pretty much up until I was like mid through high school. And then it's when we started to get into the big Instagram era, where everyone's posting pictures and that kind of thing. And it didn't get so all-consuming when I was in school. It was not that consuming. It wasn't, you know, people had social media and it was, you know, cool to have, and like it was fun to have a lot of followers, but like it was not as all-consuming as it is today. And I don't know a lot of teenagers personally. I don't have any teenagers in my life, but I have seen, you know, people write articles and people talk about things, you know, that you see videos on social media. That's where we see everything. about how teenagers are going through a bigger mental health crisis than I think previous generations have, including mine. And, I wonder if it's, social media is kind of messing with their ability to find their belonging in the world and make those genuine friendships and keep those genuine friendships and just interact with people on an actual physical connection instead of on social media where things are so not real. And so I hope that if this is not part of the curriculum anymore in public schools, at least because I went to public school, I hope something similar is at least still in the curriculum, because I cannot tell you the sense of community and belonging that this book brought me, especially in that classroom, because I remember it to this day. That was so long, like, let's see, I was about 14 when I read this, so that was 14 years ago that I read this book in my 8th grade classroom. And I remember it vividly to this day because of the community and the camaraderie it created between me and all of my classmates. And don't get me wrong, like, we were in an honors class, and so like a lot of us slightly cared a little bit more about school than some other classes might. But still, I don't remember many of the other books we read that year. And I know we read other books. I remember this one because of the sense of belonging it gave me with everyone else being so into it. And so was I. I cared so much about Ponyboy. I related to him, but I was always confused by his actions sometimes. And so it was just this really great thing that I got from public school. Don't get me wrong, so many issues with public school. Trust me. Did not enjoy all of my time there. But if there were a couple of moments, and there were a couple of moments in my public school time that stuck with me in a very positive way, reading this book was one of them. And it's really cool. I did reread this book, I think about like 4 years ago, just because I was curious to read it from like the perspective of someone who's a little more grown up. Being just 24 at the time, like, I'm not like super grown up, but I'm a little bit more grown up than I was at 14. I wanted to read it again to see how my perspective has changed, because I'm no longer the age of the main character. In fact, I'm closer to the age of his older brother that became his legal guardian, Derry. And reading it from the perspective of an adult, it's still a wonderful book. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it, but reading it at that age was so much more beneficial to me as a person, as someone taking in literature. And I think that's really the thoughts I have on this book. And I really genuinely do hope that they still read this, or at least something similar, in schools today. I don't know if I have any spoilers that I want to give thoughts on, because honestly, the whole story it's just fun. We have all of the characters. I do want to say the characters' names, because in case anyone watching this video hasn't read this story, maybe the characters' names might entice you. We have a lot of characters in this book. So obviously we have Ponyboy, the main character, and his older brothers, Soda Pop and Derry. But we have their friends. Johnny is Ponyboy's age, around 14, possibly it's like 16, maybe 15 to 16. Soda Pop is 16, I believe. And then Derry was closer to my age when I reread the book, like 4 years ago. They also have a couple of other friends. One of their other friends, he calls himself Two-Bit. His real name is Keith, but he called himself Two-Bit, and that's literally all we refer to him as the whole book, but his real name is Keith. The other character in this book that I love so much, and I think is such a complex character, especially when I reread it as an adult, is Dallas Winston. He goes by Dally, and He's such a complex character. He's older too, I believe. I don't think he was in high school with them. I think he was in this, like, around the same age as Derry, but I could be wrong. So I believe Dally is around Derry's age, and he's a little bit more of a complex character, kind of like Derry. Don't get me wrong, they all have their own complexities, but especially rereading it as an adult, I saw that more than I would have seen it when I was 14. There's also Steve. I don't know if he spends as much time with everyone that I've mentioned as he does with Soda Pop. He's Soda Pop's best friend. But there's Steve as well. The only other character I will mention is there is a girl who there is a girl who Ponyboy does become kind of interested in. It's kind of hard to remember if he just likes her or if he also just sees her as a friend or just cares about her. But her name is Cherry, and she is like in a relationship with somebody else. But Ponyboy is really one of the only people that's really nice to her. And the story is just really poignant. And even though I can't think of the specifics right now, knowing the plot and knowing what happens, it's hard to forget. So the other thing I will mention is if you watch the movie, it is so good, and every single actor in that movie embodies the characters perfectly. We watched the movie after we read the book, and it was perfect. To a T, they did that movie like the book, and I am so impressed because, you know, movies are just adaptations of books, and so I was genuinely surprised that they kept it so true to the original. So if you end up watching the movie and you like the movie, you will like the book because they are mirror versions of each other. So you get like slightly more detail in the book, but that's always the case. But otherwise, nothing changes. It's the same thing. And the movie is so good. It has all of the classic actors from like the 80s, I think, because I think it was around that time when it was made. So go look it up. I don't usually promote movies. I'm usually talking about books, but the movie version of this book is so good, so I do recommend that as well. So if you don't have time to read the book, watch the movie. The movie still has the message in it, but the book really gets it across. So I think you should read the book. But movie's fine too. That's really all I had to say on this book. I hope this has piqued at least someone's interest. I think that there's a reason that this book was chosen for curriculums for students. It has messages that are important, especially when we're younger, like teenagers, but that are still relevant as you get older too. I still enjoyed the book so much when I read it a few years ago. I might reread it again some point, you never know. It's so easy to reread this book. It's so well written and just such a great story, even though there are some sad parts and some tense parts. It's a really, really, really good book. I hope all of you will go check it out, whoever watches this video. But that's really all I had to say. Please go check out this book. Please subscribe to my channel if you didn't at the beginning of this video. I always upload new videos, even if I'm not keeping up with my reading schedule and I talk about older books I've read. I always have something to talk about. So come back to my channel, see what I'm talking about. You never know, you might find something interesting. But that's all for this week's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.